Hey, so let's have the big ending of Wine Fair here. So thank you everyone for attending, everyone who's listening in, everyone who's participating. I am Pamela Bush, the founder of Wine Fair and the Vineyard, and it's kind of crazy to believe that the weekend just is over already. But I think it's been really great. Just I have so much gratitude for everyone who has participated. And that includes not only the panelists, but the behind the scenes team, including our tech team, our retail partners, and of course our sponsors. So I thought it would be fun to have to kind of end things off with a panel that was really about tasting wine. We've been discussing kind of the heavier stuff today, which needs to be discussed, but the reason why we're all doing this is because we love wine. That's why we're in the industry. That's why we're fighting to make the industry better. So let's have a celebration of what it is that we enjoy so much. So this is Winemakers Tasting Wine with Other Winemakers, and is being moderated by Emily Coe. Emily is a wine buyer in Los Angeles. Emily buys for Tilda. Emily also is the founder of Pinkies Up, and I will let her tell you more about that and the other panelists. So I'm going to say thank you to everyone who's come to all the sessions, as this is the last one. Hopefully Wine Fair 2022 will be live, or maybe we'll have a combination of live and then some stuff that we'll stream as well. But always appreciate your support. The Wine Fair is put on by the Vineyard, which is an organization dedicated to social and environmental justice in the wine industry. And it's really great to, if I look around the screen right now, 3 of our advisory board members are here. So I would like to give a special applause for Marlen Porter of Amplify Wines, Megan Bell of Margins Wines, and Gina Schober of Sans Wine Co., who are all board members. But all of you, everyone who's in this panel is doing great stuff, not only in terms of the wines that they are making, but also with the just with what they're doing to try to support everyone in the industry so that it does become a more equitable place to work. So thank you. And I am now going to just kick back and watch the last panel. Have fun, everyone.
Thanks, Pamela. Well, welcome everybody. Also big thanks again to Pamela and Wine Fair. We're really honored just to be a part of this and to help close out the show. So to that, I think we should cheers. Boom, lift your glasses. I hope we all have them. Alrighty, so before we get into introductions, I would like to thank our sponsor, the Paris Wine Company, for helping make this event possible, and most importantly, allowing us all to get together and get a little bit of a buzz on. So if we could just go down the row and introduce ourselves, starting with you, Lynn. And don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Lynn Wheeler. I am the owner of the Hobo Wine Company and its 7 brands. We also have an import company called the B-Sides, and I'm the winemaker of my own little project called Edith and Ida. And what else? I feel like I could say a lot, but this is going to be our 20th harvest this fall. So that's a pretty big, exciting, awesome thing where I'm stoked about. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You want me to keep talking, Emily?
Keep going. Let's just let it evolve.
Right. Let's see. Well, what else can I say? Yeah, I'll talk more about the wine later, but basically, I've known Kenny a long time, and 26 years, I guess. So in 2002, when we started the brand, basically my job was like pushing paper. I filed the DBAs, I registered the TTB. Kenny was the winemaker. He went to school for winemaking at UC Davis. I got a degree in botany at the same time. So I was like the CSA manager of the student organic farm, and he managed the vineyard right next door. And the first wine we ever really made together, we called the Côte de Fumier, which, because the vineyard was next to the compost pile, it kind of means like, next to the pile of shit because anyway, I digress on that. But so now, fast forward, I basically, I did all sorts of stuff. I've, done the wine thing, but I hadn't ever made a wine. So in 2014 is when I decided I wanted to manage a fermentation. And so I made Peak Pool from the Sonoma Valley. It's another story. And then now I make just Chardonnay. I'm trying to figure out how to make it really well. So that's what I do. I'm a mother of 2. I have another other part-time job, and maybe I should stop talking. I'm not sure.
That's perfect.
All right.
Alrighty. And then how old are the kiddos?
Yeah, they're 11 and 14, and their names are Ida and Ida. So that's why I named my wine after them, and I love them to pieces. I think being a mother is probably one of my most favorite jobs for sure. Yeah.
Love that.
Anyone else a mom here on the panel? Awesome. Okay. Love it. Love it. All right. I'll mute myself. I'm okay.
Yeah, you're good. And then we'll pass it off to Megan.
Hello. Can you hear me?
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Belle. I own Margins Wine. I'm based in Central California. I work with lesser known vineyards, regions, and varietals that are on the margins. And I help small growers convert their vineyards to organic farming. That's not something I planned on doing with Margins when I started, but it's become a really central part of what I do. I farm a 2-acre vineyard in the Santa Cruz Mountains with the owner, Larry. He's retired and in his 70s, and he and I do all of the labor on that vineyard together. And then I purchase fruit from about 10 other vineyards within a 3-hour radius.
Awesome. Alrighty. And then switching over to Marlen. There you go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marlen Porter. I am co-owner and a co-winemaker with my husband, Cameron Porter. We both started Amplify Wines in 2013. We're based out of Santa Barbara County, and just more recently, Santa Maria is where we have our winery, and we focus on Mediterranean varieties for our Amplify label. And then we also have a label called Mixtape that focuses on fun blends, and a label called Subliminal that focuses on Bordeaux varieties.
Awesome.
And I'm a mom of 1.
Yay.
So his name is Miles, and he's 5. And I would agree that it's a really fun job, and it's fun to also have him grow up, with us, and being able to kind of see our business grow as he grows.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And then we're moving to Emily, because it wouldn't be a panel if there weren't 2 Emilys in the room.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. I've been an Emily long enough to have been the only Emily in my entire class. So I've seen that whole trajectory go. My name is Emily Towe, and my husband Jody Towe and I are Brix Wines. We actually have known Marlen and Cameron for a long, long time. We learned how to make wine together at the same facility starting around 2007. Wow. So it's been really amazing to kind of be on this journey together and just, see each other become successful. And yeah, we're really just glad to have somebody like that, because we live in San Diego, which is not, historically a wine growing region, at least not in recent history. So we learned how to make wine in Santa Barbara, but we're from San Diego. So when we first started, it was just with Santa Barbara fruit. And then we started kind of slowly getting to know people who were replacing their avocado and citrus groves with vines because of the drought. So we're now working with vineyards still in the Central Coast region, one up in the Sierra Foothills that's owned by a good friend, and then 3 in San Diego. So we're just kind of covering really cool sites all over California.
Amazing.
And
Awesome.
our two kids are just about grown up these days. Our daughter is 21 and our son is 17.
Wow.
So we've been
Wow.
since high school.
Alrighty, and then switching gears over to Lorenza.
Hi everybody, I'm Lorenza Marlen. I am originally from Italy, where I did my bachelor degree in winemaking and in viticulture and a couple of harvests. I then hopped to France and Portugal for my master degree and spent 3 years in Australia, working always in the wine industry before coming to California in 2019. And yeah, I'm here now and I have a small brand of my own, and I am the assistant winemaker for Two Shepherds.
Yay. Alrighty, and then handing the mic to Gina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Schober, and I'm the co-founder of Sans Wine Co. in the Napa Valley. My husband and I started Sans Wine Co. in late 2015, and we were the first producers of single vineyard variety vintage-specific wines, all packaged in cans. We started with 3 canned wines, with 2016 being our first vintage, and now we've got 7 different wines packaged in cans and just recently released our first bottle. And so that's basically, I always joke that we don't have kids yet, but I've got like 8 different children because that's basically what it comes down to when you make a bunch of different wine. But I'm really happy to be here today amongst this panel of fantastic, inspiring females.
Yeah. All right, last but not least, it's you, Kristie.
Hey, I'm Kristie, Tacey, owner and winemaker of Tessier Winery. And Gina, I feel the same way, that all the wines are my babies. I don't have any children, but all the wines are my children. I started Tessier in 2009. So this year will be my 13th harvest for Tessier. I started with 1 wine and now I'm up to 11 different wines, which is just crazy. Wow. I'm really inspired by French wines. So that's kind of like what I seek out and the style that I do. Yeah.
Amazing. Alrighty. Well, shall we move into the tasting portion of today, y'all? Alrighty. So for those of you that are just tuning in, we have 7 wines that each winemaker has hand selected for the tasting. So they are going to go into detail behind each wine. And we're just going to move along with them, and it's just going to be a really organic conversation around these wines and everything that goes in between. So something that I wanted to just bring up prior to really jumping into the tasting portion is that I always felt that there was almost this like performance when it came to tasting wines, especially as when I was a new drinker walking into wine shops and there would be a tasting happening there, feeling like a bit timid and scared to even approach and feel like you have permission to be in the tasting, to asking questions, to being pulled into blind tastings and not knowing how to navigate that. And then to now being a wine buyer and then sitting across from reps where I feel like it's still so formal, or it can be formal and performative in a way that they're still analyzing your perception. All to say, I think there are no rules here, and I want to dispel that idea that there has to be some kind of rigid format to wine tasting. And I think the bottom line is that you guys are sharing wines that you've created with so much love and telling the story behind that. So with that, Lynn, I would love for you to start us off with your Edith and Ida Chardonnay.
Thank you, Emily. Oh, I'm so relaxed now. Awesome. Man, I can remember the days I used to, Edith and Ida, woo! I used to go around, pregnant with both the girls. One time I was like nursing Edie, pregnant, and, selling wine. And wow, like that's intense. Like being so vulnerable. And then like, it's that relationship between a rep and a buyer that's a whole other discussion, I think. So anyway, yeah, maybe everyone has it in their glass. I'll just start talking about it. And if you want to interrupt and we like all drink together or whatever, let me know. But so this is the 2019. The first vintage of this wine was in 2015. And so like I was mentioned earlier, I had done a lot of, you know, everything, like squeegeed, bottled, you know, whatever, tasted blends, like all sorts of wine stuff, but I had never managed a fermentation. So I made a peak pool. It sort of made itself. I was like, oh, this winemaking thing is great. This is easy, like awesome. You know, I can cook, I can make wine. So 2015, similar thing. I bring the juice in, I press it, I put it to tank, turn the temperature down and just like wait around. It makes itself. I think I'm a winemaker. I'm like, yeah, that's great. 2016, I do the same thing. And like, oh my God, it was like bad. Okay. It was like over oxidized and like out of the hillock. And I was like, oh no, you know, Kenny, what do I do? He's like, I don't know. You know, he like wouldn't help me. Like he was like really important to him that I go through this process and figure this out on my own, you know. We can skip over that vintage, but basically what I learned was like, all right, wow, like this wine needs something else. And so what I do to it now is I bring it in and I foot tread it. And so what that does is it like breaks up the berries and it basically I'm oxidizing those berries before I put it into the press. I press it lightly, like a champagne kind of press, put it into a tank and leave it there for like 2 days. And not only does that settle all like the gunk out, but it oxidizes it. Okay. So it's like it gets oxygen in the press, but it also gets oxygen in the tank. And because in 2016, what had happened is that I kept it all precious and was like so worried about it, that it didn't oxidize the juice. So then now I barrel ferment it. And wow, that's just so much better. It has oxygen while it's fermenting. I'm stirring it. So that happens and that goes pretty quickly. I guess, you know, a week or so, it's sort of in the barrel. And then of the Gros Lees into neutral oak. And I just leave it there, but I do keep it topped. Because it's sensitive to oxygen, right? So that's what I've learned. You know, I was like, oh man, I cannot I have to baby this thing and watch it and taste it often and like make sure that it's topped and because I just didn't like it. You know, I didn't want it to taste like that. And then I put it back into tank for like maybe 6 weeks before I plan to bottle it. And that's just to sort of like integrate it back together because they're all in separate barrels. I want to bring it back together and then bottle it. So should I talk about the vineyard? Should we drink some?
Yeah,
a little
let's
dry
drink. Keep going. Question though.
Yeah.
When you come across your like first mistake or you perceive as like your first failure, maybe, do you feel like that limits your freedom to be creative and experiment? Or does it then, that's the first initial like pass and then it releases you?
You know, I felt like I think it released me actually. I think I was like afraid and I didn't know any better. So basically like my winemaking journey was following Kenny around in the winery and you know, I'd watch him and I'd move hoses and I'd wash this and I'd pump that and I'd do the work and I'd ask questions and like, but you know how when you ask things and if you're not actually the one doing it, you can kind of forget or whatever. And so I was like doing what I thought was right. And like I said, I'd made that peak pool where it was like, well, it just happened so naturally. I was like, oh, well, white wine, maybe that's how you always make white wine. But then what I learned was like, oh, whoa, like, like, you know, and I have a degree in botany, so I can kind of like understand some science if like, you know, I am taught it or I'm read it or I experience it firsthand. And I'm like, oh yeah, all right. Like, so oxidation and, you know, and I love like Chablis and, you know, they have these cool cellars and I go there and they're barrel fermenting everything. And I'm like, dude, that's what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to try that now. And so I think, you know, and if you have the space and you have the barrels, then you can do that. Right. So, and I did. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question. I hope it did, but,
no, definitely.
Okay. I don't know. You want to talk about the wine, or
Yeah,
should I talk
let's
about
get
the
into
vineyard?
it.
Like whatever.
Let's start with the vineyard.
Okay. The vineyard is a really special place. It's up in the Redwood Valley in Mendocino. It's called the Lalonis Vineyard. It has been organic forever. I mean, there was a winery there. I think it was called like Ladybug Wines or something like that. And so these vines are very special. They're planted in 1944. If they're not the oldest Chardonnay vineyard planting, they're the second oldest. It's part of the Historic Vineyard Society. The story goes that the men planted these vineyards before they left for war, and so they'd have something to come back to. So these vines are beautiful. And the vineyard's gorgeous. And you know, there's I can't remember the plant that milkweed. Oh yeah, milkweed, just like growing on the side for the monarchs. It's just a beautiful place. Orchards, historic and gorgeous. And so it's a little warm there for Chardonnay. And so, you know, that's one of the things that I deal with. You know, it's like, can I get what I perceive or can I get like what I want from this wine? You know, is it possible? And so that's kind of like the journey I'm on, because when I try Chardonnays that I really enjoy, it's like, oh, they were made in this like dark, damp, cool cellar with this like slow fermentation, or they come from the coast with this special climate. And I think this vineyard is really special. And so I'm just really trying, like, how can I find it, you know, like without messing it up, you know? So, and the 2020, I'm really stoked about. And I do feel like every year I get better. I just get more, like, I understand it more. Cause I would consider myself a new winemaker, even though I've been in the wine industry for 20 plus years. I am a new winemaker, and especially white wine. I don't know. I don't know. So I'm talking maybe too much, but
it's all good. We're here to talk, and we're here to drink.
It's so weird. Like, the computer's so weird, but yeah, go ahead, Megan. Yeah.
Okay, so my first question is, I think you said 2016 was the year where you made it your wine in a really reductive style, meaning it didn't get a lot of oxygen exposure, and that wasn't good for the wine. And I'm curious what happened, because most of us, well, I don't want to speak for the whole panel, but I know that I try really hard to make my wines in a reductive style, and that I fear not oxidative process. And then my second question was, what was the oak program on this wine that we're tasting? And when you said like it might be too warm there for you to do what you're trying to do, I was curious what you're trying to do.
Okay, let me remember all the questions. So the first question, yeah, so I like reductive wines. I mean, I do. Like when I open them and there's like a little reduction, like especially in Rieslings and stuff, I expect it and I like it and I'm into it. This was like a problem, I thought, to me. Like, I didn't want my wine to smell like this and taste like this. It wasn't like a reductive. It was like aldehyde, you know, like, you know what I mean when I say that? I'm sure you all do. I don't know, Emily, if we want to talk about that for the 41 people watching, but
let's do it for the 41.
Yeah. You know, it's like nail polish or something. So it's just, to me, like, I don't know, you know, it's not like how, like the wines that I drink and enjoy. I just didn't want my wine to smell like, tell us all the things. All right, Hannah. I didn't want it to like smell like nail polish. So, okay, then did that answer that question, or it did, or not? Yeah, more or less. I mean, okay, we can keep going there. Okay, and then the second question, the barrel program. So in 2015, Kenny had this like new oak barrel, and I put the wine in that, and I was like, oh, you know, I actually like oaky Chardonnay, I do. But I thought, oh my God, for like this is an interesting question or thing. It's like, all right, here is this person who's making her second wine, and she put this like fancy French oak barrel on it, and it tastes like fancy. I don't know. This is a whole other question, but I was like, oh, I like it, but it's like, am I going to be able to sell it and like come out as being like overly serious? And I'm trying to do this thing. And anyway, so based on that, I was like, oh, I'm going to like not do that. Okay. And I'm going to go neutral oak and just see if I can like figure out like the vineyard and what to do. So then 2016 happened and that was like, whoa, crazy. So here I come with my new approach. And so now I use really old barrels. Like, and I ferment in really old barrels. And really old, I mean like I have, I think I have like a 2010, I have a 2012. I make about 9 barrels of wine because some of it goes off into the camp Chardonnay. So, and I manage about 9 barrels. So, okay. And then the third question was, maybe I wasn't, okay. So I don't know, like, you know, I think that there's acid in this wine. There is. I mean, I know there is. It's bright and acidic. But I think that I just didn't want it to be like this over bomb, like fruity, like not, you know, like a California Chardonnay. I wanted it to just be like nuanced and interesting, you know? And I think it is. I mean, it's getting there, but sometimes like when I taste it next to something else, I'm like, ooh, it could be different. And maybe that's just insecurity, right? Maybe it's just like, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with it for sure. I think, what do you guys all think? Tell me what you think of it.
I think it's lovely. I think it's really well balanced.
Good. Yeah.
My question is for those that might be wondering, what is the advantage of using old barrels?
Okay, well, so like you're just gonna get not a lot of overly oaky vanilla sort of taste. It can actually, you know, it depends on how the wine is made and how long it's aged, but it can either mask like the beauty of the fruit or it can be pretty well integrated. So if you use, and that's like a fun thing for a winemaker to choose to do. And on white wine, wow, if you use too much, you know, I'm sure we've all had those oaky Chardonnays where it's like, wow, all I taste is like a vanilla candle or like just, you know, an oaky chip in my mouth. So by using like neutral oak, what you're doing is you're giving oxygen, you're able to provide that micro-oxidation from the barrel in the wood, but without overly influencing it with oak flavor.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lynn, for starting us off.
Oh my God, it's hard to be first, you know? So anyway,
great.
We didn't really talk about I don't know. I'm glad you all like it. So I talked a lot, but nobody else did. So yes.
We can always circle back.
Okay. All right.
All righty. And then Megan, do you want to kick it off with yours?
Yeah. So the wine that, if it's not clear, we all have each other's wines. We sent them to each other in advance. So the one that I sent is a 2020 Muscat Blanc. And this is from Contra Costa County at Sictini Ranch. And a lot of people work with this vineyard in our community. It's one of fairly few certified organic vineyards in Contra Costa area. So I made this wine for the first time in my 3rd year of wine production, which was 2018. And in 2016 and 17, I only made one white wine, which was Chenin Blanc from Clarksburg. And I was looking for some other more unique white varietal to work with, but didn't really have a preference because I felt so strongly about Chenin, and then all the other white varietals are like, like anyone will do. Like, let's see what I can make. I'm going to answer Kristie's question really quick. It's Muscat Canelli / Muscat Blanc. I labeled it as Muscat Blanc. It's a synonym for Canelli, probably more commonly known as Canelli, but I really don't like that word for some reason. And I think it's because it's confusing. Like there's cannelloni, there's the cannellini beans, and there's just cannolis, you know, as a dessert. There's just too many things that sound like that. And Muscat is already confusing enough as it is, because people are like, is this Moscato? Is it sweet? Is it sparkling? I don't really know what this is. So Blanc is just like a nice neutral word that I feel like people associate with wine. So the first year I worked with this vineyard, as often happens when you are not the farmer, I did not have a good idea of when I should pick it. And I ended up calling the pick way too late. That means that the grapes were way riper than I wanted when they actually got picked and got, when I drove them to the winery, got driven to the winery, as if we don't all do that ourselves. It just happened. So I was trying to compensate for a potential lack of acidity the first year I made the wine in 2018. Because it's from such a warm region in Contra Costa area, that's like in a part of the Central Valley near the Delta in California. So I thought, I wonder if I can kind of make people kind of allude to acidity with bitterness. So the first year I made it, I destemmed half of it and fermented it on the skins for 4 days. And then I later blended it with the other half of the wine, which had been directly pressed in the press. So white wines, for those of you that don't know, the whole grape, the press, and then the grapes get pressed and the juice comes out, and that juice becomes the wine, and then the grape skins that are left in the press just go to the compost or pigs or wherever you're gonna bring them. So most white wines are made that way. But what I'm saying is that half of this Muscat is skin fermented, aka wine. So I never would have done that tactic if I wasn't trying to create this acidity bitterness kind of thing the first year that I made the wine. Now, for the last 2 years, we've picked about 6 Brix lower than that first year, which is really, really significant. It's like a third of the scale that we use. So for me, it's perfect now. The acid is way lower. It's where, or the pH is way lower. The acid is way higher. It's right where I want it because the grapes are less ripe. But I've continued making this wine partially skin fermented because I liked the way it turned out that first year so much. It increased the mouthfeel. You know, skin fermented whites, it gets a little bit heavier on the mid palate. And then there's this really nice slight tannin and bitterness from that. Not too bitter, just an extra complex little spark. And then Muscat of all types, of which there are like thousands, which is why Kristie asked what type of Muscat it was. Muscat is super aromatic. So having this extra time on the skins and the skin fermentation just increases those beautiful floral aromatics. To me, the fermentation always smells like and roses, which I think is lovely. And then just like Lynn said, I also use only neutral oak for all of my wines. It's half skin fermented. And it's only in the neutral oak for like 5 months max. It's really just a storage vessel for me because I don't have the tank space in stainless steel to be able to hold this liquid, which is what bigger wineries can do that don't want to use oak. So for me, I just get these super old oak barrels, also 15 plus years old, and the wine just stays in there for storage for the 5 months. And then right before bottling, I add a tiny bit of sulfur. I'm sure this will come up at some point, but I'm just gonna say it now because we are natural winemakers. I'm a big believer in small amounts of sulfur. I add 20 parts right before bottling. And that's the only addition or modification that happens with this wine.
Awesome. I think a good question would be, or to answer, is at what point would you call a wine a skin contact wine and an orange wine for some people? Is it based off of the color? It's the process and how what you perceive to be technically in that spectrum of skin contact, or because if it's half of it has it skin fermented, yeah, at what point is your discretion calling it skin contact?
That's such a good question. I feel like skin contact, to call it skin contact, should be really intentional. So for me, even if this was only on skins for 2 days, but it was the whole wine, I would call it skin contact. But because I'm just putting that into the blend as an extra layer of complexity, I'm not trying to make a skin contact wine with this Muscat. And I also know, just from my experience, because I get to taste the full skin contact wine, it tastes totally different than what this final blend tastes like. It's much more savory because skin contact tends to up the pH or lower the acidity. So a lot of the molecules that are like active at different pHs change, and you don't get as much flowery and fruity characters. You get much more like ginger and characters with the full skin ferment. And to me, it's not really about color, because like I do make a 25-day skin ferment Chenin, and that doesn't have any color whatsoever. And it's like definitely a skin fermented white, very intentional. But I think everyone probably has their own definition, but in my opinion, it's like the whole wine was skin fermented intentionally. That's skin fermented.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Megan. Lynn?
I just want to say I'm so glad to know that. Like, you can taste that skin fermentation. Like, it's so, like, you know, it smells like Muscat, and then you drink it and you're like, oh, wait, what, you know? And so knowing that about it, that's so cool. Now I'm like, oh, I feel like anyway that I can like grab onto that, because now I know that, you know, I can kind of find in the wine what maybe that the skins have done, if that makes any sense. So,
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And an anecdote that I found, at least from my white wines that are skin fermented or partially, is that they last forever in the fridge. Like the Muscat that I'm drinking, that's mine, that I showed you guys, I opened this 7 days ago, and I'm drinking the end of the bottle right now, and it's delicious. It hasn't really changed at all. And I feel like that stability comes from the process of skin fermentation.
Awesome. All right, so we are going to move into our rosé category of the tasting. And then Marlen, did you want to start us off with your Sangiovese?
Hi, yes. So what you have is our 4 on the floor Sangiovese Rosé. We initially made this wine in 2015 under a different name. It was called Pink Flag, after a Wire album. And unfortunately, we got an email, not so happy email, from the lead singer of Pink Flag, and it was not so punk rock. And so he told us not to use the name anymore. So this wine has gone through some changes, and we definitely feel like now it's kind of where we would love it to be, where it's in its happy place, where the name is kind of a play on words. It's kind of the 4 on the floor is kind of beat in house music. And this is also aged underfloor. So if you know Cameron, he loves puns, and he loves to make up fun names for our wines. That's like totally on the floor. Is now 100% Sangiovese. So this is actually the first year that we made it 100% Sangiovese. In the past, it had been Cinsault. And what we realized that we needed for floor fermentation, which you need, you know, pretty humid weather, but you also need a grape that can be a little higher in alcohol and have retain a good amount of acidity. So this wine was inspired by a winery in Provence called Clos Savon, and they do a rosé under floor as well. And that was really kind of the inspiration for our rosé. And so this is foot crushed and left on the skins for about 6 hours and then pressed. And it was fermented in neutral barrels. And basically the way that you form floor is you leave the barrel not fully topped up. You leave about 15 to 20% of headspace, and then a yeast veil just forms on top. And again, we actually have seen the most floor formation since we moved to our new facility in Santa Maria. We're only about 4 miles from the ocean. So that's something that we actually have to keep on top of to keep from forming floor, even if there's just a minimal amount of headspace. So this has really been like our favorite vintage that we've worked with, because not only do we feel like Sangiovese works so much better for the way that we make the wine and the style of the wine, but the fact that you get so much more fruit and the floor formation so much more precise, it just seems to be more of a complete wine this for 2020. And so, yeah, and then we also bottle it in these little 500 ml bottles because we did not make a lot. And so we thought it would be fun to make it in these smaller baby bottles. So cheers.
Cheers. Lovely. And then you said that having moved your winery, why do you think there is more yeast formation?
Well, we're closer to the ocean, so there's a lot more humidity. And it was, and I think also every cellar is different. Like we've moved 3 times, and we feel like every single time we've moved to a different facility, your wine changes and behaves differently depending on the cellar's environment. And for us, that just seems to be it. It faces closer to the ocean. It's definitely much more of a humid environment. And so for us, floor is something that we want to create. Like when we first had the idea to make floor on the floor, we were like, is that even going to happen? I know we have a concept, but is it actually going to happen? And now we try and prevent it from happening, just not specifically to this wine. So yeah, this is definitely more of a savory rosé. It's a rosé that we feel like we love to pair with foods that you wouldn't normally think you drink a rosé with, like artichokes, things like lots of garlic. We definitely love to cook, and it's one of those wines that's really good with, pickled vegetables. Definitely a lot more savory. Kristie said great texture. Thank you so much. We don't fine or filter any of the wines. And so we believe, especially with whites and rosés, that by not filtering, you're really keeping a lot of that great texture. It also, the wine sits on its lees throughout the, duration of its time in barrel. And so we only really rack it once right before we're about to bottle. And we also, it's sans souf up until we bottle it. We do about 10 to 15 parts just to kind of keep the integrity of the wine intact.
Awesome. And then Marlen, I was first introduced to your wines actually through a rep tasting, and they really emphasize the marriage between music and wines. And I would love to hear from your words how big of a part music plays into the story of Amplify.
Yeah, it's huge. So Cameron and I initially bonded over music. I think music and wine has been both of our passions, and it was something that we bonded over 15 years ago. And Cameron's a musician. I think that's his first love, really. He's a musician and still plays music, makes music with his best. I was a band geek. I played the flute from junior high into high school. And then my father was a musician and played in a band with my uncles. So I grew up with, my family practicing in the garage and music all around. And so it's something that we are inspired by, because we feel like the kinship between music and wine, it's an art and a representation of your, unique personality and individuality. And it's a way to express not only the grapes, but like who you are and what you feel. And I feel like music and wine has the ability to do that, make memories, make friends, and have something that people bond over.
And we have a question from Alice Anderson. Can you have bad floor?
No, because that's basically how you make sherry. You can just let it go all the way and keep aging until you have a sherry, and then you add a little alcohol in there. But I don't think you can have it if you don't want it. It's one of those things that, like, if you don't want floor, you got to keep topping it up. You got to keep topping up your wine, because then it's going to take over. It's a yeast, and so it's a native yeast too. It's some in the cellar, but it's one of those things that, again, you have to keep on top of. And it's just interesting. I just wanted to touch on Lynn's comment about having a really funky reduced wine. So we had a very funky reduced 2014, must have been the year, Viognier, and it was a very similar experience. We had a very easy go. It was actually Viognier we worked with the year before, and so again, we were like, it was our first vintage of making a white wine. We're like, we got this. This is delicious. And we made the same thing, much more in stainless. And it just, and when we bottled it, it was like one of those things, like we just kind of like put it to the side and forgot about it. The interesting thing now is that wine has aged so well. And it's one of the few wines that we're lucky enough to have some wines behind. And reduction is really a preservative in some ways, you know, especially for natural wines that have a good amount of acidity. And, you know, definitely at first, it's not one of those things that is pleasant. But I think over time, as wine ages, it can definitely keep the acidity and everything else in the wine that is kind of like being covered up by that reduction. But yeah, it can definitely also go too far. So we've learned, you know, to have smaller ferments. And, you know, I think like Lynn and Megan, we do a lot of old neutral barrels just to control. And on all of our wines, we're able to taste these small lots and go, okay, learn from each barrel and kind of decide, okay, this needs this needs that. Whereas a bigger stainless tank, like, you really can't do that. You have the one tank and that's it. So I think that's something for us that we've continued to have these smaller fermentations throughout, and then end up blending into one whole wine.
Yeah. And then real quickly, how would you say reduction appears on the palate for the consumer?
I think for me, it's more of like something you smell, but on the palate, to me, it could taste kind of like burnt popcorn, or it depends on whites and reds too. I think with reds, it have a burnt hair. Like wines can kind of taste like burnt hair, or more chemical, like a perm. And sometimes that's part of like a bottle shock too. You know, if we bottle a wine, and I think that's something with natural wine that is not really talked about enough, but we've definitely had experience with it. This vintage and other vintages are like the bottle shock of natural wine. You know, you're not really moving, you're not putting all these things, but it's still kind of a crazy process for the wine to then go into bottle. And what we've noticed is, depending on each varietal, they go through bottle shock or go through some variation of change in the bottle for first like year, really. We've tasted a wine and go, oh, this is great. Out of bottling, and then within like a month it'll taste a little reduced, and you're like, where did that come from? And then it'll go away. So I think it's also something to not worry about. I think the wines go through different phases, and that's something for us that we've had to really be a lot more intuitive with our winemaking. And, you know, especially now, we started with working with 2 different grapes in 2013. Now we're working with 18. And so I think learning every varietal and learning what each one needs and wants and time, and not to kind of like, it's hard not to worry, but go, okay, this is going to go through a funk and it'll bounce back. Learn along the way.
Awesome. Thanks for the knowledge. All righty. And then we're going to move on to the next wine. So Emily, if you would like to kick us off with that.
Yeah, of course. So this is our 2020 Uncontainable Rosé of Cinsault. And I chose this wine because, again, being here in San Diego, it's an exciting time because, I mean, we're now an emerging wine region, right? So nobody has a preconceived idea of what a rosé from San Diego tastes like. It's just not there in your mind. Like if you're making, Napa Cabernet or something like that, it's like we're kind of getting to translate and to tell the story of the vines here. So this particular vineyard is a small family-owned spot. It's dry farmed, it's organically farmed. The vines are planted on their own roots. The soil here in San Diego is pretty uniform, decomposed granite. There's not a whole lot of variation, but the decomposed granite is great for drainage, and so you're able to play around with own-rooted vines and also with dry farming. This is the 8th leaf of these vines. So we've been working with them for this rosé for the past 3 vintages, and you know, it just seems they kind of, they're spindly, like you know, they've got soul, but it's, you can tell that they're striving, and they're really beautifully farmed. We're actually the only winery outside of the small family winery that's on site of this vineyard to work with this fruit. So it's pretty special to be able to put it out there and say, okay, here's a little taste of San Diego. So we bring this in, it's picked early in the morning. And then for this vintage, my daughter and I did the foot treading. It's always foot tread, and it's always only me. But this year I decided to go ahead and accept some help. We've been making a little bit more every year, so it's fine when it's just a couple of bins. But once you end up with more bins, then you really want to foot tread yourself. It's time to bring in the reinforcements. That's why you have children, right? So my daughter Talia and I foot tread these, a pretty, you know, solid foot tread. We've played around over the years. There have been years where I just kind of do it lightly, and we don't necessarily get the color and extraction that we're looking for. So this was a good solid foot. This is the happiest I've ever been with the color of this wine. You know, color doesn't matter, so they say, but it's not true at all. It really definitely matters. So our winery is located in Escondido. I see your question, Gina, which is North County, San Diego. So we're in the northern part, just kind of south of the Camp Pendleton Basin, then to the eastern part of the county. That's where all the agriculture is. People say, you know, here's San Diego, and they think, oh, like vines growing by the ocean, but there's none of that. You know, the oceanfront property was all built out long ago. So the agriculture is all in the eastern part of the county. So yeah, back to the winemaking, it's you know, aggressive foot treading, and then it sits on the skins for, this one was about 5 hours. So kind of similar to the way Cam and Mar did theirs. And then it goes into the press, and we barrel ferment, also really old neutral barrels. It goes through full primary and malolactic. We don't do anything to, you know, to block anything. It just kind of does what it does. And yeah, I mean, to me, this is, I think, Cinsault is like San Diego's future. I feel like most of what's planted here that's doing really well, we do a Counoise that's, you know, makes a really fun wine, and Cinsault, and it's those southern Rhone and Mediterranean varieties that are really enjoying this climate. And as it gets warmer, I think that's just what you're going to see. So, you know, in 10 or 15 years, you might see 10 different Cinsauts from San Diego, but it's fun to get to experience it now. Lynn, yes, so my degree is in creative writing, which I can now tell my parents, it's not true that I'm never going to do a degree in creative writing. I do all the label design and all the text on the back, and that's a really fun outlet for me to be able to do that. You know, it's in just enough words that it can come to you, and you can set it out, and there you go. But yeah, they're always inspired by, you know, sometimes song lyrics or other, you know, things from books or just stories, or sometimes it's just the wine that just tells you kind of what it wants to be on the label.
Yeah. So then I guess in that way, maybe the wine inspires the poem?
Yeah, always.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, why don't you read us this little poem on the back for us?
All right, so it says, introduce the melancholy I've felt since last I saw you. Holding on to the uncontainable is like the waves of the wind. And I must confess that was inspired by a PM Dawn song that Jody and I danced to at our prom in high school. And, you know, it's just kind of like the soundtrack of our lives kind of woven in, and, you know, as far as what we're doing now. And yeah, so that part is fun. It's all fun, really. And we started out with Brix, just wanting to make some wine because we had fallen in love with it and we had learned how to do it just by volunteering and spending time. And so it wasn't ever an effort in the beginning to start a winery. It was just, we wanted to make some wine, and we did it in our garage. We started out in 2009 with 3 barrels in the garage, and wanted to continue. So that was when all of the beloved paperwork that you all do along with me, I'm sure, all of those wonderful, everything that you have to file paperwork for, began. And we're still small, but we just did as much as we could kind of handle while having other full-time jobs at the same time for many years. The winery has been my full-time job for the last 4 years, and Jody still has another full-time job. So, and we're at about 2,000 cases.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Emily.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All righty. And then we're going to move on to Lorenza with a Pinot Gris.
Yeah. So we're drinking this one now, which is actually technically not a rosé. It's a skin contact, and I think it's really rare to see a Pinot Gris with this color. Well, that's because it spends 5 days on the skins. So the vineyard is the Clairbec Vineyard, just outside Sonoma town. So it's bit of a cooler spot in the Sonoma area. It's a semi-old vineyard. I think it was planted around 25 years ago. And the soil is classic Sonoma, so gravel and loam. And the vineyard is dry farmed and organic. So we started making this wine in 2017. So we wanted to expand the skin contact categories that we have. And I personally really love it. So it's pretty straightforward. The grapes get stamped and crushed. And then it stays on the skin for 5 days in beans, open, where fermentation kicks in. Only indigenous yeast. We don't add anything, obviously. And yeah, after 5 days, it gets pressed and it goes into natural barrels. So pretty old barrels, French oak, and it stays there on heavy lees. We don't do any barrel steering. Basically, we don't touch it. We just top it monthly. Goes through malolactic. And then after more or less 5 months, we rack it and bottle it. And it's personally probably my favorite out of the wines that we make, because I am not a big fan of Pinot Gris. Sorry, Pinot Gris lovers out there, but I think it can be a pretty boring variety, honestly. But the fact that it stays on the skin, it just brings out so much. And I've never tasted a Pinot Gris that expresses so much. Besides the color, which is pretty fun, I think it's very savory, and on the nose especially, and the palate express a lot of fruit. I would say some ripe apples and strawberry cream. And yeah, it's a wine that is made to be drank immediately. That's why it doesn't stay much. We like only 5 months, because it needs to be vibrant and fresh and easy drinking, and you don't have to think about it twice. What do you think?
I love it. So question that I think we're all thinking is, of all the places you could choose, why did you end up in California?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. It wasn't my plan. I was not planning on it. I was actually really hoping in staying in Australia, even though I'm glad I didn't eventually. But after my visa expired in Australia, I was in touch with one of my old friends, a guy that I studied in Montpellier with, and he works here in Napa Valley. He was like, come over for a harvest. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I need to go somewhere else. I cannot just go back home in Italy, otherwise I would get super depressed. So I came over for a harvest. Fell in love with him immediately. We got married after 2 months, and I haven't left since. So it's not that I really chose California. I think it's mostly California decided
Told
that,
you.
yeah, I needed to stay. And I don't regret anything, honestly.
Mhm.
It's a place that I'm still learning to love and to understand, and I'm still exploring. And unfortunately, I arrived in 6 months after COVID started. So
Mm.
was that obviously there's no comment about it. It was a horrible year for so many reasons last year, but now that we can finally get out into society and meet new people, I'm very happy to be here and meeting all of you, even though it's online. But I'm curious to see what's out there. So yeah, cheers to that.
Cheers. And because California's wine history is still relatively young, and how do you think it compares to the wines that you grew up like drinking?
Oh, so different. Extremely. I mean, I grew up in Piedmont, Italy. So for who doesn't know, it's the region where Barolo, Barbaresco, and where Nebbiolo is from. So there are so many differences, starting with the fact that back home, a lot of wineries are family run. Here is more, or family run and also like multiple generations. Here is like mostly first generation. The climate is completely different and the approach to wine is different. And I'm not saying like better or worse. It's gonna be a deep topic to get into now, but I think, you know, something that for example, I don't like about California is that because it's so young and it grew, especially like Napa Valley, grew so fast. Some people just think that, you know, when you grow up and when you start to make so much money, when you start to get so famous so fast, you start to think about yourself a bit too much. And I feel like sometimes people should just like slow down. But that's the only negative comment that I have, because the climate, you know, it's exceptional and there are amazing wines that come out of here. And I am loving, personally, I'm loving more the Sonoma side and not so much the Napa, even though there are awesome wines that come out of Napa. And the brand that I have with my husband is mostly Napa, so I'm not talking shit about that. But I think Sonoma has more of a variety, and I'm totally loving that.
Amazing. Well, you guys are also free to talk shit. This is the after hours, okay? Alrighty, so we're gonna move to Gina with your Carignan.
Do you think, I don't want to put Kristie on the spot yet, but maybe we should drink her Gamay first. What do you think, Kristie? I feel like just my wine's a little bit bigger than yours, and I don't want it to away from your Gamay. Does that work? Oh gosh, does that work?
She's like, no.
Like, nope.
Hit the wrong button. Yeah, I think it is a little bit lighter. I was just trying yours. Yeah, we can do the Gamay first.
Okay.
Let's do that.
You
I don't
guys
know.
ready?
Okay, cool.
Alrighty. Kristie, whenever you're ready, we'll start with you. Is everyone good? Do they need a water break, bathroom break? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. All right, Kristie, we're ready for you.
So this is a Gamay Noir, which is one of my favorite varietals. This is from El Dorado, and Chuck and Ron Mansfield do the farming, and I started working with them since 2011. They're committed to sustainable, and they really care about their people. They have a crew that works for them all year round because they also have a stone fruit business. But the soil is really interesting to me. It's volcanic soil. It's high elevation, so 2,500 to 3,000 feet. There's granite in the soil, which is kind of true to Beaujolais, which again, I'm always inspired by French wine. So I'm kind of thinking like, I love wines there. Like, how can I emulate it here? So I was super excited to start working with this fruit. And I think I started with it, I'm not sure now, maybe 2016, I started working with it. This fruit is so well behaved. It's all hand picked, which I'm sure most of everybody's fruit is hand picked, and then hand sorted, and then we don't do any destemming. So it's 100% whole cluster. We put it into bins. I always want to go into a tank, but when you work at a custom crush facility, this comes in a little bit later, and they're like, we're all filled up. So I'm usually in tea bins, and then I use a dry ice bag to kind of keep the oxygen off until it starts fermenting. But basically open top fermenters. But it is partial carbonic just because there's 100% whole cluster. Once I see some fermentation activity, I start foot stomping it like twice a day just to get it going. And foot stomping, it's amazing to be in your fermentation, just smelling all the smells and kind of like being a part of the wine. And it's a really good core workout, but it also, you feel the microclimates within the fermentation. And you can like really move your feet around to kind of move those clusters around. It's like the only way to get it going. Then when it's done fermenting, I press it off pretty lightly into neutral French oak, so used at least like 4 times. And then I have a couple stainless steel barrels, so I put it in there as well. And the Gamay seems to be prone to VA, so that's why I don't age it that long. I bottle it usually in February after harvest, so like 6 months. And I like it a little bit chilled. It's just kind of wild and easygoing, easy to drink with food, without food. Yeah.
Awesome. And then can you explain what VA is for those that might not know?
Yeah, sure. A VA is volatile acidity. I feel like some wines are more prone to it than others. But being a natural winemaker, you know, you're not using any SO2, and I try not to use it till the end, just before bottling. So I can notice it. It smells like bruised apples or bruised fruit. So I'm always like, I hate it, you know, and then I like get it tested and kind of know where it's at. And it's I don't know. It's just like I learned a lot the first couple years when I made it. And like whenever you're doing a new wine, like Megan was talking about this, like I just always take copious notes, because like you just have to have a starting point somewhere, and then just note what you did. And then if you didn't like it, that's how you can tweak it from there. I was a research scientist for 10 years, so this is like my forte. Wow. Is note taking and lab notebook kind of situation. But it's really helpful in this career to because you make wine once a year, so you don't remember what you do. I mean, especially when you make a lot of different wines, so it's good to go back to the notebook to see. But the Gamay is just kind of prone to that, so that's why I just started bottling it earlier to not have that issue. Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions, guys? Oh, Lynn?
Well, I wonder if you think that the farming, or if the farming has anything to do with a wine being more sensitive to VA. I feel like I've learned that over the years. Like if somebody's spraying something too close to harvest, or I don't know. I mean, would anybody know or think that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I do notice it more in the Gamay, but I get a lot of different grape varieties from them. Grenache is another similar one. I mean, I think it may have to do with there's not a lot of anthocyanins, not a lot of color components to absorb the oxygen. So just like these light reds are just more prone to it. I don't know, anybody else?
Well, we made this Charbono, we've made Charbono for years, and this Charbono seems to be like really sensitive to it, but it's not light skinned. It's quite the opposite, right? It's so dark, Charbono. I don't know. That's an interesting thing. I'm curious about that. But
we have the same issue with Cab. And it doesn't, we've sourced it from different vineyards. We sourced it from, you know, someone that was more sustainable. It was dry farms. Maybe we thought, okay, maybe it's because it's nutrient deficient, and so it doesn't have enough nutrients, you know. But then we switched vineyards where it's like impeccably farmed, all organic, beautiful, and it's still, if not worse. So it could just be varietal specific. Some are more prone to VA. And we worked with Grenache the first time this year from Demetria, another organic vineyard in St. Anne's Valley. And that also was prone to VA. It's one of those questions that we ask ourselves, like, why is this more prone than this, you know, hardy versus just, you know. And so, yeah, that's something that we have to really be careful with.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed it, like I said, in Grenache and Gamay.
Alrighty, then we are back to Gina again to finish us off.
Okay, great. Well, I just have to say, so far, everyone's wines are just so delicious, and this has been really fun. A great way to taste wine in a group setting again. So I just want to say, all of you have just done an outstanding job, and yeah, this has been awesome. But so yeah, Carbonic Carignan and in can. When the first year we worked with this fruit was in 2017, and this is from the Poor Ranch, which is in Hopland, Mendocino. And we were introduced to the Poor Ranch, or the Poor family, in 2016 when we were trying to find fruit sources. And we fell in love with the Poors and their property. And so they are fifth generation on their property, and they have about 80 acres under vine, and it's Johnny Poor, his wife Susan, and their son John Samuel, who farm everything. And they showed us their Carignan blocks, which we hadn't worked with prior, but in 2017 we were looking to make some more wines, and they showed us the Coyote Rock block, and the vines are planted in 1943, and we just told them, like, we want to, you know, they only had a few tons available, and we're like, whatever we can get of this, we would love. And so in 2017, we made like 150 cases, and I wanted to do something carbonic. I felt that a carbonic red made sense for canned wines, something that you could chill down. And so we did about 150 cases, and then it became a really popular wine for us. It was Jake and I got married in December 17, and we put this into kegs and served it at our wedding. So it, you know, this has been one of my favorites throughout the years, and I just absolutely love the grape variety, and we just are trying to really show it for what it is. And you know, Carignan was, you know, it's mostly known for being a blending variety, and that's really how most people have drank it or have seen it. But, you know, really old vine Carignan, when the yields drop, the grape itself can be very expressive and just have a lot of fruit and just be really pretty. So in 2020, which was an already very crazy year for all of us, and then add on the crazy fires that we had everywhere in California, made it a really challenging year. But we decided to just do all of our red wines in a carbonic style. And I can talk about that a little bit later on, but we kind of, we took what we learned from the 2018 vintage and applied it this year to our red wines, and so far it's paid off. But we brought the fruit in, and this vineyard's certified organic. There's no irrigation lines, and everything's just head trained. And what's beautiful about this too is that when it's you know, right before harvest, some of these vines get over 6 feet tall, and they're just really crazy, gnarly, and just rugged. And so we brought the fruit in. For us, everything is whole cluster for carbonic. So we just basically shovel in all of the whole clusters into we'd use all stainless steel for all of our wines too, including our reds. So just went directly into stainless steel tank, and then we added in dry ice during our carbonic fermentation just to force out the oxygen, and then seal up the tank, and then just kind of let it do its thing. And year after, it just really depends on the year. The first year we did our carbonic Carignan, the primary didn't finish until it was like 26 or 27 days. In 2018, it finished after like 21 days. It just really depends. In 2020, primary finished after about 2.5 weeks. So, and then, yeah, we don't, and I know I can't remember who talked about it, but the sulfur additions, we don't add any SO2 to our wines. And for us, because we make our wines and they're going to cans, we learned early on that even using really small amounts of SO2, which we did for our 2016 Sauvignon Blanc and Rosé, like it was only 30 parts per million or under. And you know, Lynn talked about reduction earlier, and something that she appreciates and really loves. It can be something that can be a big turnoff, at least from my point of view, for cans, because the environment itself is already super reductive. So we make our wines in a reductive style, but we just noticed early on that, you know, we'd crack open those cans and it would just be like burnt matchstick and egg. And, you know, we already haven't had an uphill challenge, still do to a degree, in selling more expensive canned wines from, you know, esoteric varieties and all of these things. So we kind of just trusted our instincts. And in 2017, we went even lower on our SO2 additions, and still the wines were very reductive. So we went in 2018, no SO2 on any of our wines, and the wines just tasted better and just smelled better coming out of the can. And for the most part, you know, not all of our drinkers are going to be pouring these into glasses. So that's always been kind of our, I guess our perception of SO2. Like, I'm not someone who won't, that's for me not a big deal when it comes to drinking wine. I'm more sensitive to it, and sensitive in being that I can smell it and, you know, taste it, you know, very right away, or even in small amounts. I just get it. But, you know, we're wine professionals. We know that blows off after time and, you know, with oxygen. But because it's cans, we kind of had to adapt in a different way. But Megan had asked a question about, does carbonic, or how did it, you know, maybe help us mitigate smoke taint? Well, in 2018, we, from this property, we also make Zinfandel off of this property, and our rosés come off of this property. And so in 18, the fires in Mendocino were actually on the Poor Ranch property. And so they were able to, they had a bulldozer out doing fire lines, and they had a little bit of smoke. They lost a couple rows of vines on some of their blocks, but they were able to keep the fire from really destroying the property. But we did our carbonic Carignan, and then we did our Zinfandel. And we did our Zinfandel as we normally had done it in the prior years, which was just bringing in fruit, cluster sorting, destemming, and then putting it into tank and doing punch downs during primary. And we've noticed over time that the wine it shows smoke taint a little bit. It's somewhat well integrated, but we've tested our wines actually in January. We wanted just to see a chem panel for guaiacol for our 2020 reds, and then we also just did the 2018 Zinfandel and carbonic Carignan, and the levels were higher on our Zinfandel than it was on our 18 carbonic Carignan. And I mean, by that time we'd already produced and made our 2020 reds, but we just kind of went off of that experience. Thank you, Megan, for making that. Yeah. Smoke tank. Yeah. But we went off of that experience and seeing kind of what happened, and just decided that we were going to make all of our reds in a carbonic style. And we don't notice, I don't notice any smoke on this. There isn't, I think it's like one microgram really. And even our Napa Cab that we did in a carbonic style, it's super light and doesn't really taste like, Napa Cab, but there is like 3 micrograms. And that vineyard, like there was actual, like you could see ash on the grapes when we brought it into the vineyard or into the winery. So that's kind of how we adapted for 2020, which is a question we've gotten asked a lot about being out in the market or just talking to consumers. Every virtual tasting we've done, they want to talk about the fires and, what that's done for our production. And, we, so this has been the same vineyard site and the same block we've worked with since 2017 off of the Poor Ranch. So kind of like Kristie mentioned about chilling down her Gamay, this is one I always love chilled down and always try and encourage wine drinkers and just regular consumers to try. I always tell them, like, you guys might not enjoy reds chilled, but, just try it that way. That's how I really like to drink it. And, it's been a fun wine and, just something that I could drink like, light reds, chilled down all the time. So that's kind of, I think that's kind of it for at least talking about the 2020 Carbonic Carignan, but.
Thanks, Gina. And then I feel like canned wines have a stigma that they can't be elevated and dynamic. What would be your PA for everyone here watching about canned wine?
Oh gosh, that's changed so much over the last few years. There's a lot of bad canned wine out there. And when we first started to do canned wines, it was my idea. My husband told me I was nuts and I was crazy. And I'm sure many of us, maybe you've not been called crazy by your husband. I probably will be many other times in my life, but I convinced him, on this car ride when we were going through Guerneville, like, hey, we live in Napa, we live in St. Helena, and neither of us have, neither of us come from, families with property, unfortunately, or we didn't know how eventually we would break into the Napa wine industry, and it's very expensive. Land prices are out of control, we all know in California in general, it's crazy, but this was kind of our way to get into the Napa wine, to get into making wine in an affordable style, and that we could do ourselves, financially do ourselves. And so, starting off 5 years ago, there was, under 10 producers of canned wines. Now I think there's like close to 400 different labels and like over 1,000 different wines packaged in cans. And so, there's a lot of bad canned wine out there, or just, bulk mass produced, no story. You don't know who's made it. And so that's what we were going for. That's what we didn't want to do. And we said we wanted to try and change people's perception and, tell them these are the people who make the wines, give, label the wines with the names of the vineyards, because our growers, without them, we wouldn't be able to produce what we do. Like, their story and giving them recognition, to me, is just as important. And those relationships are very important, especially in years in 2020 where, a lot of people decided, like the week of picking, to not, come through on their contracts because of the fires. And that benefited us to a sense, because we were able to grow a little bit and to purchase fruit that we normally would not have access to. But it was because some big wineries, left their growers hanging. And that's just, in our eye, that's not cool. And so we, for us, I forget which panel I was listening to earlier. I think it was the one about natural wine, what now? But transparency was discussed. And for me, my background was in hospitality and working as a somm. And as a wine buyer, previously I would meet all these, winemakers or sales reps from a winery, and, they'd be showing me wines, and you never totally got the full, you didn't know everything that was going into the wines. You didn't really know, you just got the pitch, not always everything about it. And so in my, in my growth with natural wine, it was seeing what's going into these commercially produced wines and then what is not in these really incredible, alive natural wines I was tasting. And so that in and of itself is what drove us to make our wines in a natural style and to just be very transparent, because you don't get that. A lot of consumers are not getting that. And especially with canned wines, they're not. And so just kind of through learning in the process and going back to like adding sulfur dioxide, the can we feel is a great vessel for natural wines, because you don't have that oxygen exchange. There's no headspace. The cans, the aluminum itself holds temperature very well. I've had some instances where I've accidentally left cans in my car in the summertime in St. Helena, and for like a week at a time, like not realizing, and then as a science experiment, popping them in the fridge to try the wines, and they were completely fine and not spoiled. So a long way of kind of going around it, but just like with your bottles, with cans, there are some producers out. I mean, Two Shepherds is they've got some canned wines now too. It's like, it's just doing as the consumer your due diligence to like look and see, if it's a canned wine, if it's a bottle, whatever it is, like the producers that are the legitimate artisanal ones for cans, you'll go to their website, you'll go to their social media page, you will see who's behind it. You will see where the fruit comes from. You will see their process. And the ones that don't have that, it'll be very apparent. It'll be all marketing. It will be nothing else but like a pretty kind of, a really nice website without being able to find a damn thing about the wines or the owners or who's making the wines. So I want to, tell everyone, don't like just, shove canned wine to its side, because it's going to say, and, we're in it for the long haul. And a lot of people this last year have stopped producing, or some bigger producers have gone out of business. But this is a great little vessel. And I'm hopeful that more people more serious producers will continue to make or make some canned wines and continue to add to the space to give the consumer better options. But
awesome. Thanks, Gina. Well, we're nearing the end, so I wanted to make sure we squeeze this last bit in for any of our aspiring winemakers that are here tuning in. What advice we would give them. And so I feel that the best way to approach this question is, what was something that you would have liked to tell yourself within the first year of winemaking? And if we could just give like 30 seconds for each person, and we'll go in the order. So Lynn, kick us off again.
That you have to sell the wine you make. So it's like, it's really fun to like make the wine and like all of it's like really great, but actually you have to sell it. So, and then you do it, you have to make money, and you actually don't get that. There's this whole, someone else can maybe talk about it, but it's like, there's a big upfront cost investment. Then you have to make sure you can and want to, and have it in you to sell the wine, because the money it's just, anyway. You have to sell the wine. That would be my 30-second spiel.
And then Megan.
Okay. Mine will be that you truly don't make money enough to live until year 6 or 7. Everyone told me like year 6 or 7. I was like, I want to be able to do this before that. I know it, but I'm in year 6. Partway through year 6 right now, and I just last part-time job. So year 6 or 7 when you make enough money to live.
Well, congrats on that. And then Marlen.
I would say and also have a plan, because yes, you will need to sell the wine, and don't grow too fast, because if you grow too fast, then you're going to come back to the whole money situation. And especially if you're small, if you're doing it yourself, you don't want to be in a position where you're, you know, the money comes in very slow, especially if you're working with, you know, wholesale. And depending on, you know, the market or a pandemic or all these things that happen that we have no control over, you know, I think is something. And also give yourself some grace. Like, it's gonna, things are out of your control, and you can only control what you control. And I think kind of learning to give up some of that and just kind of go with the flow, and like, again, just trust your intuition and do your research as well, and decide like what's your best business model for you and what works for you.
Awesome. Emily?
This is all just such good advice. I think it's great that we're speaking openly about this, because, you know, it seems like such a glorious and glamorous thing, but really it's very hard work, and it takes a very long time. So I would say, you know, make sure you love it, because if you love it, then, you know, then that's okay, and you'll figure out how to make it work. But above all, like, it has to bring you joy, and
Yeah.
and then you figure everything else out along the way. But yeah, just be ready for a good long haul.
Lorenza?
I think we made it very clear that one is here for the money, but my advice is to stay curious and stay humble. And from my point of view, I obviously can say, do not stick to only one project or only one variety, only one place or only one mentor. Just travel if you can, and taste as much as you can. And, you know, once you do a few harvests, you might think that you're getting it and that you're understanding and that your way is better than others. It's not like that. I think the more you learn, the more you have to understand that there are so many other ways and so many different recipes. There is not one recipe for winemaking, so just keep exploring.
Love that. And then Kristie, we'll jump to you.
Yeah, I would say, you know, it is such a hustle, and it is a cash flow problem. You have to sell the wine to free up the money, but also the business side of it. It's so crucial, you know, being able to calculate your bottle cost, just to figure out how you can make money. And it took me 9 years to quit working for someone else. So good job, Megan, for doing it quicker. So yeah.
And Gina?
I would say yes to everyone else's advice, because basically everyone said something that I was already thinking. But I would say, this might come off negative, but I don't mean it that way. Like, learn how to take rejection, or you're going to hear probably a lot of no's, whether it's from everyone. We all know it's wine. Everyone has an opinion, especially if you're trying to go out and sell your own wine. But don't let hearing no like deter you from moving forward, whether it's with a wine buyer or a customer or a distributor. Like, just keep pushing, and not everyone is going to like what you do, and there will be some opinions that come forward you probably don't care for, or not nice, quite frankly. But just stay strong and just keep doing what you're doing, and it'll eventually pay off, especially if it's something you're very passionate about.
Alrighty, ladies. Well, I think that concludes our panel. Thank you guys for closing it out to such a spectacular weekend. Just want to thank you each for sharing your wines and your hearts behind them. We always talk about like a sense of place, so it's really fun to understand a sense of people behind them as well. And we just want to thank again the Paris Wine Company for their sponsorship. Many thanks again to Pamela and Wine Fair for organizing such a powerful group and bringing forward so many necessary and illuminating conversations. And lastly, to everyone that has attended and supported this event, we thank you and we cheers to you. Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye, y'all.